So welcome back, David. Lovely to have you back again. You've been very popular on our show, and so we decided to have you back again because people seem to want to hear from you. You brought not only just knowledge to the show, but a message of real hope, and I think that's what people really need right now. So that's what's lacking across New Zealand. So thank you so much for that hope, and so we thought let's infuse some more hope in it.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Bernadette. I really enjoyed the last time we were together. Great questions,
Thank
lots
you.
to talk about.
I just want to start off with a quote. One of the most consistent messages coming from economists isn't that New Zealand lacks hardworking people. It's that we relied too long on population growth while failing to solve our underlying productivity problem. The challenge isn't simply growing the economy, it's growing the economy in a way that makes every New Zealander more prosperous.
Yeah,
What do you think about that? Do you want to comment on it?
I think that's actually very accurate. Unfortunately, New Zealand has had almost insipid productivity growth for the last couple of decades, really. We've had a few things that have given us a bit of a shake-up. The global financial crisis. I think that's had more lasting effects than people realise. The cost of capital went up quite a bit because people were afraid and there was risk involved. And so for the average Kiwi buying their mortgage or the average business trying to raise their overdraft, it was tough and it became more expensive. That's one thing. Then we've had a couple of big shocks. When we arrived, and the books were not good after the previous government spent like there was no tomorrow, thinking that everything would be okay, and it wasn't, and we had inflation, and so now we're paying more for that debt. On top of that, we had our friend from America who levied tariffs on us. That was another hit for our exporters, and then of course they went to war with Iran, and the Straits of Hormuz have actually shown up our real vulnerability for things like diesel and the energy that comes in a liquid
That's
form. Right. So we've had one thing after another. This is not the first time. You know, there's been plenty of other times when New Zealand, at the bottom of the world, has been influenced by things that are way beyond our control. My first mortgage was 22%. And that was hot on the heels of the last global oil crisis, funnily enough, in the Middle East. So we've seen this before. I think we can start to talk about what I see as some of the solutions for that. And yes, the economists are right. We have some things that are structural in our economy that we really need to address. Yeah.
And organizations such as the OECD, IMF, and Treasury seem to agree on many of New Zealand's economic challenges. From your perspective, how would you describe the current state of New Zealand's economy? Are we facing a temporary slowdown, or do we have deeper structural problems?
So New Zealand is actually quite resilient. We've got very strong base economy, especially in our exports. The agricultural sector basically saved us through the global financial crisis. They saved us through COVID, and they're actually still producing trade surpluses for us now, even with the hits we've had through lack of supply of oil and so on. So that's pushed the prices up, but we're still seeing the green shoots. So just before the war in Iran, we were noticing that unemployment had just peaked up, and people were spending money a little bit more on capital, had just turned up, and we had the first trade surplus in a long time. So all of those things were happening, and then we had the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the same thing is happening again. We got hit, and the economy has actually got a slight upturn again. So those three indicators have actually come ahead again. We just need a little bit of a break, but there are some structural things like monopolies, banks, supermarkets, energy, that are like a dead weight on our recovery. They raise the cost of living, but they also raise the cost of doing business. And we have to attack that. We have to actually solve that for ourselves.
And do you have a solution for that? So let's take one of the solutions right now, like the monopolies.
Yeah.
What is the solution that we have around that?
Okay, and we spoke a little bit about this before. In a nutshell, we need to lower the cost of capital. It costs us too much to loan money from the bank for a mortgage or for an overdraft. That is because the 4 Aussie banks that are above 85% of our whole banking market are what the Commerce Commission called a cosy oligopoly. That basically means they're acting like a cartel. And in the middle of that, there's this thing called the net interest margin. That's the difference between what the bank buys their money that they can lend you. The percentage rate they pay the Reserve Bank is about 2.5% at the moment. It's called the OCR, the official cash rate. 2.5% was just 2.25%. But your mortgage is going to cost you 5 or 5.5%. And the difference between those two is about 2.5 to 3% percentage rates. So the issue we've got is that in other parts of the world, that is way less. So if our average is 2.5%, you go to Denmark, it's 1%. You go to Norway, it's 1.5%. Now let me just make this real for you. If you've got a $750,000 mortgage and your mortgage costs you 1% less, that's $7,500 you will save each year. That's $150 a week in your pocket. Simply because we're stuck paying way too much for our mortgages. And we need to fix that. It's structural, it's embedded, and it's one of the biggest things we need to do. Energy is the same problem. We're paying way too much for our power bills. We're paying too much for our energy. Supermarkets, we're paying way too much for our food. It's because the monopolistic behaviour that's alive and well in all those sectors. And we should be able to stop this. We should be able to address it.
So many economists argue that New Zealand doesn't have a people problem. We have a productivity problem.
Yeah.
We work hard, yet our productivity continues to lag behind in many comparable countries. Why has productivity become a challenge, and what practical steps do you think you can suggest to lift productivity and wages?
Yeah. So one of the, basically they're talking about labour productivity there. There's another thing called multi-factor productivity, which takes into account different factors that affect our productivity. And one of those is investment, capital investment in businesses to make your business grow faster or go faster or do things more efficiently. New Zealand has been a bit of a laggard here, but I put that back to the cost of our capital. It costs too much for us to borrow to do capital investment to make our businesses go faster. So if we can pull that back and allow our small to medium-sized businesses and our larger businesses to get a better rate at which they borrow money, that will induce them to invest more. That's what brings you productivity. It's not by making people work longer. It's by actually giving them the tools to be able to produce faster and quicker. In a nutshell, to me, that's one of the biggest factors we've got to address. The other side of it is we do rely on agriculture or primary produce in a lot of areas for our main export revenue. Now, their productivity is actually not that bad, but they don't actually employ that many people. So our manufacturing has been hollowed out over the last 40 years with our whole approach of leave everything to the market. Well, manufacturing is a key part of the whole supply chain to anything that you buy. One person employed in manufacturing basically generates about 5 people outside of that. If you take that part out, which is the most productive part of the whole value chain, and you give it away, that lowers your productivity overall as a country. Interestingly, manufacturing has been quite resilient. The ones that have survived through some tough times are actually peaking up again as well. They call it the manufacturing index. So there are some good signs there. We just need to tweak some things to enable them to invest more. Government also put in a policy around an investment rebate for depreciation. And in a nutshell, that means that you can buy some capital spend some money on some capital equipment, but you can rebate the interest on the depreciation earlier. So it's another way of actually getting people to invest in their own businesses and improve productivity. These things all added up, lower the cost of capital, get your depreciation earlier, invest in new ways of doing business, they all add up really quick.
That's true. And what about the cost of living? Because that's a big question, and I know we've also discussed that before. But it still remains one of the biggest concerns of New Zealanders. So I think we almost cannot stop giving them reassurances that there are ideas, policies, and the government is going to, put plans in place to actually alleviate those problems.
Yeah. In the 90s, I don't know if we've spoken about this before, we had this thing called the Bradford reforms in energy, our power system, where they tried to make our whole power supply a market. And we've got 4 major, what they call gentailers, which are half generators and half retailers. Well, actually more generator than retailer. Mm-hmm. And so 3 out of the 4 are 50% owned by the government. But the government is not very active in there. It's like a sleeping partner for most. And so the people that are directors and the people running those businesses do very well, thank you very much, out of having control over the generation of energy. Has anyone noticed their power bill going down lately? It's a monopoly again. And it's even worse in the fact that those gentailers generate energy, whether it's through hydro or geothermal or anything else, and then they retail it as well, and they're telling us all that it's a fair wholesale price to which everybody can apply. And so they're competing with other electricity retailers being owned by the people that generated the power. It's a structural problem here that we want to do. That's why when we say we're going to split the gentailers up, we're going to split them into generation and retail, and they'll be separate entities. The other interesting thing is that Transpower is the company that is like the skeleton for the whole of the country of where your power goes. It takes the power from the Monopolies Dam and sends it to Auckland if we need it. It's amazing, architecture that we've got there. Then we have these little lines companies that take it from the big lines company, the Transpower lines. Those are those big ones that you see on the big architecture in the middle of the nowhere where they've got massive, great big towers. The lines companies take it from there to your house. They're also trusts, mainly owned by the public. So the public already owns Transpower. We own the trusts. If we can own the generation, we can control the wholesale price. That is a huge difference. Mm-hmm. So then you can leave retail where it is. It's a market, a true market, but you're reducing the cost, the wholesale cost to them so they can compete. At the moment, the pricing mechanism makes the cost, that wholesale cost, the highest possible cost from the highest form of energy that is supplied to them. So if it's coal, it's that. Not really cheap hydro or geothermal. So we've got some structural things in there we've got to change. And just imagine what it would mean if you were able to get $100, $200, $300 back from your power bill, either per month or even per year. But I'd rather it was per month.
That's right.
Because I know most of us are paying way above that.
So why is it sounds like common sense to me what you describe it. Yes, I know it's a bit complex with, understanding. Your average everyday person wouldn't understand it, but it sounds like common sense though the solution.
Yep.
Why have y'all have been the only people that have actually seen it so far? Why has no one else, has it been tackled before, or are y'all are the only ones who are seeing it and want to tackle it?
We're not the only ones that have seen it. We're the only ones that are prepared to go at it and address it in the way that we're talking. There's a conundrum here. The 50% that the government owns within all of those gentailers gets a dividend. Many MPs and people in government are quite happy with those dividends because then they can take that money and spend it somewhere else. That's okay. However, if you're not governing properly and not governing strong enough, We're all paying for that dividend.
That's right.
Everyone pays their power bill, and they're giving that dividend to the, to the government. Well, let's make that more fair, please, because my grandfather, your grandfather, and the generations before that built that stuff. It's ours. It's our energy. It's our water. It's our geothermal energy. Let's get real with this. And the basic thing is that you show me a country in the world where the cost of energy is high and they're rich and productive. The two things don't go together. If you go back the other way, where you've got a lower cost of energy, usually you'll find that those countries do very well, thank you very much, out of having lower costs of energy. It changes everything in your economy. It's right at the basis of it. It's the platform from which you can build things. So we've got to get there, got to get back there. We used to be that. We're not like that anymore.
So basically, the dividend that we're getting back and we seem to be happy with is we're also paying for that dividend actually.
Correct. Your power bill pays for that.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it just doesn't make sense, really.
No.
We're paying for something, but we're getting it back, paying with one hand and getting a little back with the other hand.
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
And
goodness.
look, we're just going to make work out of it. I'll tell you what, if we lower the cost of energy, you watch industry take off. Yeah, it'll change
That
everything.
is one of the biggest costs of manufacturing, isn't it?
Correct.
The power
Yes.
and energy. And I think
Yep.
we kind of underestimate that massive cost on manufacturing, which has taken so many of our manufacturers out just in the last 6 months.
Yeah, yeah. I can give you a little example. I went to a very large mill, sawmill and paper mill in Hawke's Bay. They produce their own pulp, produce pulp and sell pulp. That goes into cardboard and that sort of thing. But they also have a timber mill. To make the pulp, you need heat. And so when the wood goes through the timber mill, they take all the chips and all the sawdust and everything, you put it together, and they have bioenergy from that helps them make the pulp. So they're just using it themselves. The rest of the mill, though, they've actually got to buy electricity. They took me into a room where they were looking at how they purchase energy. They're on what they call the spot market every day. Every day. They're trying to buy energy at the cheapest possible rate at the cheapest possible time. They are watching it like a hawk. It's like a gambling game. This is crazy. There they are doing the best thing you could possibly do to keep it, look after their own energy needs, and they're having to act like that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I know. They should be spending it on their time and energy on other
Exactly.
things. Yeah.
Exactly.
So let's go to small businesses. They
Yep.
employ hundreds and thousands of New Zealanders, and often described as the backbone of the economy.
Yeah.
Yet many owners tell us they're drowning in compliance, rising costs, and uncertainty. What solution do you have to help small businesses? They need to, obviously invest more in their businesses. They need to grow and they create jobs. So what sort of solution or hope do you have for small business?
Yeah, we've got to actually get behind our small business again. They're under so much compliance, whether it's health and safety or whether it's regulations with the local council or it's the Resource Management Act. All of those things are being looked at presently within government. So looking to completely overturn the current Resource Management Act. It's way too compliance laden. And there's a lot of time spent in court arguing over whether XYZ business can go ahead or not. And it takes years in some cases for larger businesses to actually get past that initial hurdle. This is nuts. What you're actually doing is shoving regulation in the front of an entrepreneur. You're stopping them from doing business. I've seen overseas investors and large entrepreneurs give up and leave. They just don't want to do this anymore. They'll go somewhere else where it's easier to get things done. There's a balance there. We want to look after our environment. We don't want pollution. We don't want somebody taking advantage of us. But we've gone way too far the other way. We're way over-regulated and we just need to cut that back. This government has done some good things to try and address that. So that's one small part. The other part for me is the small businesses is lowering their cost of capital. Their overdraft rates. Why are they 10% or 20% when the OCR rate is 2.5? It's what they call risk weighted. But I think they weight that risk just maybe a little too much in the banks. And our poor businesses, they're either weighing heavily on their mortgage You know, I've been there and done that. You raise more money through your mortgage against your house and take a risk in business because your overdraft rate is ridiculous or your lending rate is ridiculous. So, and even worse, if you look at how the banks make their profit, they make almost, I can't remember the percentage, but it's very high. It's like 60 or 70% of all of their revenue comes from mortgages, not business lending. Why? Because mortgages are guaranteed, they're absolutely low risk, and they make good money out of them. There's a little bit more risk in supporting our own businesses, but we think, and I think, the risk weighting is just a little bit too much in the bank's benefit here, and that is because they're a monopoly.
That's right. And then the solution to that is obviously buying back BNZ.
Yeah, well, a few people have really asked us about that. You know, we can do it. Kiwi Bank is making good ground. They're getting better at being a challenger bank. But if we were able to combine the Kiwi Bank with BNZ, for example, you'd probably get to a quarter or a third of the market. That changes the dynamic completely. And it's good debt if we have to buy it. Mm-hmm. It's good debt because it'll have a very high return on investment. But we'll also, if we own it, be able to leverage and attack those interest rates to get them where they're making a fair profit, not excess profit, which they currently are. Banks are making excess profit.
That's right.
Yeah, so we need to just kind of attack that right at the nub of it and try and get that back in line. Interestingly, you know, if you look at Norway, with their sovereign wealth fund, which is, last time we spoke, I said 1.7 trillion. Well, I underestimated it's 2.2 trillion now, and that's US. So New Zealand is like 3.6 trillion. That's huge. That's a huge amount of money. And guess who looks after that fund? Norway Bank. They have their own bank. The wealth funds in Denmark, about 700 billion, Danske Bank. Go to Singapore, you look at Temasek and the government investment that they have, Central Investment, can't remember it. Two things there. One looks after a lot of assets and makes sure that they actually provide a revenue back to the government. They have their own bank. That's what's in common. They're building wealth for us, citizens, people that choose to live here. They're building our overall wealth, and they can take that money and they can invest in social and economic development ongoing basis. So it's actually really important for us to have strength in the banking sector so that we can ensure that we own and control our own sovereign wealth funds. So Winston Peters announced just recently that he wants $100 billion future fund, he's calling it, which is a sovereign wealth fund, the same as those other three examples. That's good. I reckon we'd do more. I can see no reason why we can't do more than that and build it up. But it'd be really important, I think, to have a bank that can manage that for us.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it'll only future-proof New Zealand for us, really, because that's what it's all about. It's not about, yes, we do need some current solutions, but we do need to future-proof New Zealand, especially, and we'll talk about that, especially with the aging population that we have. So we somehow have to get on top of that and future-proof it even more.
Yes.
Also, can you, some people have fears that it's going to cost us a heck of a lot of money. They've thrown some numbers around about buying BNZ.
Oh, yeah.
Can you speak into that a bit?
Yeah, I can, but I can't give you the details. What I'll say is we can do it. It's well within the realm of being achievable. Let's just flip through.
You're quite confident about that, obviously.
A mix of debt and equity, and it can be achieved. But let's just think about this for a moment. I'm just thinking of a number. It's anything between, 10, 20 billion dollars. What are they investing in India?
That's true.
Are you serious? That's a good investment. We're providing investment to increase their technical knowledge over things that we do.
That's right.
Are you serious? That's how you want to spend that $32 billion?
What about the Paris Accord?
Yeah, well, we're
Yeah.
out of that,
Yeah.
thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that anytime you like. Yeah,
That's right.
that was
It's-
another announcement. We're out of there, and we're not
Yeah.
listening to the WHO anymore either.
That's
We'll
right.
make our own decisions. Thanks
Yeah.
very much.
And people don't understand that those are the reasons why we need to pull out of those
Yeah.
other countries and other economies that are going to benefit them but not
Yeah.
benefit New Zealand.
Yeah,
It's,
absolutely.
it's time we began to look at ourselves
Yeah,
and invest in ourselves.
yeah. And alongside that, it's why if we provide ourselves, if we create more generation here, if we discover oil and gas, we can do in Norway. And that's why we've pledged $1 billion to actually survey the whole of New Zealand to make sure we've got the right data. Now, many people have told us that we're right. There is oil and gas there. Some people think it's as good as Norway. Who knows? Let's do the numbers and make sure we're right. But also, Shane Jones has gotten $200 million to invest in a thing called supercritical geothermal. So geothermal's got way more capacity across the country at the moment, especially in the central North Island around Taupo and Rotorua. There's plenty of geothermal fields there we can tap into. But the supercritical stuff, that goes down a long, long way. And we're challenged with an engineering problem. Getting it down that far into that kind of heat to extract what you need for a geothermal from there is a real engineering challenge. If we crack that, the productivity from geothermal will go through the roof. Our capacity to produce cheaper power will also go through the roof. So we're looking at that. We're also looking and investing in hydrogen, green hydrogen. Did you know that hydrogen can actually just exist under the ground? You know, we all think it gets manufactured or something. They've got a huge field in Southland of hydrogen. So we're looking at that. So New Zealand has so much resource,
That's right.
so many options, that future, in my view, looks really bright from that perspective.
Economists warned that future governments will face increasing pressure from superannuation healthcare and aged healthcare. So just like moving on to, preparing for an aging population, how do we prepare now to ensure future generations aren't left carrying an unsustainable burden? I think one of it, you already spoke about buying back BNZ. That's definitely going to future-proof New Zealand a bit. Are there any sort of other...
Let me give you an example of taking the wrong decision way back when. Way back in Muldoon days, back in the 60s and 70s and so on, and then into the 80s, Winston Peters said, we want compulsory superannuation. Well, compulsory superannuation would have meant that everybody that earns a living would have been paying into a superannuation scheme. Now we call it KiwiSaver, and everyone's talking about making it KiwiSaver. I'm sorry, but that's like 50 years too late. We could have been doing it way back then. Now, the Denmark example, well, they did it back then, and their retirement fund, sovereign wealth fund, is $700 billion. Ours is 90. There's the difference. So we've got a problem there. That said, we've also got an ageing population that's coming into, and they will take more resources from health, etc., etc. We do actually have that $90 billion super fund, which was put there, late as it was, to actually subsidise our generation, the older generation, as they go into retirement, subsidise the government in paying them for their superannuation. The next group behind us, the Gen Xers, won't be as much of a burden because there's less of them. So we've actually got to get through this next gap, 20, 30 years. That's one thing. So we could lean a little heavier on the super fund, and of course with the opportunity to build our own sovereign wealth fund, a future fund, it gives you a different view on how you manage the finance. A lot of people, when they hit 65, they're worn out. You talk to tradies, you talk to often Māori, Pacific, 65 is quite a good, that's good to get there.
That's right.
So are we, by shifting the age further, are we excluding them from superannuation after they've worked all their lives and paid into the government with their taxes? Are they going to miss out? How does that work? So every option that you see coming through is actually, I think, suboptimal. If we lean a little harder on superannuation, while we've got this big population going through, that'll ease things. Also, the next generation coming through will have more of a KiwiSaver fund that will actually help them personally, so that the super is, if you like, subsidised from private savings as well. So it's doing a little bit more of the heavy lifting. Into the future, this KiwiSaver funds have surpassed super already in the last 5 to 10 years. They're up to about $129 billion, as against the super fund at 90. Now, the people that run the super fund are fantastic, by the way. They get really good returns there. It's a very, very good fund, and it keeps earning money. So when you think, there's 90 million, we're going to spend it all. No, we're not going to spend it all. We're just going to lean it a little harder. And because you're growing it, it gives you more to use as a subsidy to help the government pay for superannuation. So those three things together actually make a bit of difference. And I think in a lot of cases, a lot of these people have what they call, John Locke called a social contract. When they started work, they said, well, all you got to do is, pay your tax and work hard. And by the time you get to 65, everything will be fine. And we'll look after you with a super payment. And everyone will do it. It's universal. And now we're going back on it. Now they got there, we're trying to pull back. And we're reneging on the deal. Well, we don't have to.
That's right. If you were able to implement 3 major economic reforms over the next 5 years, what would they be? And what would success look like? How would ordinary New Zealanders notice the difference in their daily lives?
Yeah. The first one is the monopolies we're talking about. Get the structural change in supermarkets, in energy and in banking, so that the benefits of lower costs come to us as citizens. That's what it's for. That's probably number one and number two. Number three is we can get better at how we develop and how we do our economic development. I was lucky enough to be on the Provincial Growth Fund advisory board when the Provincial Growth Fund first came out. I'm now seeing some of those projects 5-10 years later coming to fruition, like the mussel farming off of Potiki. They now have a factory and they're exporting. I can list a whole bunch here. We actually have to be active. We have to support people. We have to support business. But it's not any business. It's actually what the rest of the world is figuring out. We can't leave everything to the market. And we need to concentrate and focus on the things we're really good at and support that and grow and diversify from that. So if you look at food and fibre, we're some of the best in the world. Our dairy market, lowest carbon of any country in the world for its exports. It's fantastic. We've got to concentrate on those things. And then there's the other stuff coming out of like tech and data. So Datacom, large business in New Zealand, they're now exporting their expertise to Australia. So that's like a revenue earner for it. They've grown up here, a New Zealand company. It's fantastic. One of the things we invested in when I was in the Provincial Growth Fund was we invested in this thing called Code, which is the Centre of Digital Excellence. And it was to provide startup money for young gamers. And I didn't know what they did, what was going on with those. I thought, really? Okay, gaming, right, that's interesting. That business, that whole sector started off, I think when it started off, it's about $30 million all up value across the country. It's now surpassed $1 billion because we backed winners. We backed people who had really good initiative, and we understood that, and we put the right people in place to make sure that they got the seed funding, but then also got the right sort of funding when they needed to ramp up later on, the right sort of finance. Sometimes it has to come from overseas because our local banks don't support them so much, but we've gotten there. Plenty of opportunity there. I could go on in that area, but there's plenty to get a hold of and support.
And I suppose one of the ways to get there, currently solve some of the problems, but especially for the future, is to invest in skills.
Yeah.
So I know that you'll have some policies on expanding apprenticeships, strengthening vocational education, and supporting businesses as well with internships.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
let's talk about that, because that is like a positive move in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also you'll have a much more holistic approach, I
Yeah.
believe, with these policies. So
Yeah.
can we talk about that?
Yeah, so there's a good reason for focusing more on vocational and apprenticeships and that sort of thing, because your tradies here today, right? Those guys aren't going to be affected by AI. If anything, AI will help them a bit. Searching stuff, finding the right supplies, whatever that is, doing an analysis between their supplies from there and all that sort of stuff. But they're still doing things that AI will never be able to do, at least not in our lifetimes. Similar in other vocations. So if you're worried about what AI may bring, don't think it as all these jobs will disappear. Think of it a different way. You have the same number of people who are now going to be way more productive. So it's a bit of a catch-22, I know, but we need to get a hold of it and we need to utilise it for ourselves. If we don't, others will beat us, and we've got to remain competitive. So I'm really pleased about that. I can see there's opportunity, but also there's new things happening. One of the gaming companies I was at the other day, and I said, so what are your skills needs? What do you need? What can these guys do? And he said, well, we used to want coders doing the coding stuff. Now we want programmers. They get paid more because they're producing the final product. We also need upper management to actually run teams to develop new products. We also need people that are really highly ensconced in markets and understanding each market and following up with where their games are going and who's picking them up, and then reinforcing that and following that. So it's almost like the old SEO, the search engine optimization stuff.
That's right.
These are really cool skills for people to have. And then it's not like way out there. It's not like you need a PhD to do this stuff. It's not like that at all. They can be trained. And there's so many businesses like that at the moment. So I think it's a good shift to, from completely focusing on university education towards what are the vocations, what do we need? We need more engineers, we need more programmers, we need, so on and so forth. So, there's lots of opportunity as long as we're growing our economy.
And I think that what you're also suggesting with AI, while it might close down some jobs, but it's also opening up opportunities for other jobs as well.
Yeah. I'll give you an idea. Some people think that, my wife's a GP. Some people think that AI will replace general practitioners. I just laugh. So you've got no idea what a general practitioner deals with. The relationship between the general practitioner and the patient is the key thing. So all of those relation building things, the relationship things, utilizing your knowledge. Yes, she can use AI to understand a whole variety of different drugs and their outcomes and all the research that's been done in various things, so she can get that information really quickly. But at the core of it is the relationship between her and her patient. You can't do that with AI.
No.
And then people are saying, well, it's going to be sentient. Well, yeah, okay. When? No one's actually nailed that yet. I think we get a little bit of hysteria in here. Let's use it for what it's good at. It's really good at analysis.
Yeah, I think the one thing that, in fact, I was talking to Clyde, he's a computer engineer. I was talking to him about one thing that he can help doctors with is they've got a heck of a lot of compliance and paperwork.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And if someone can actually work out on how they can...
Yeah, keep going, Clyde.
Yeah, keep
Nail that.
streamlining that. I've given him the idea, so, I've told him, I said, you know what, there's such an issue there with...
Yeah.
Because it's taking away precious time of the doctors from the patients.
Absolutely.
And compliance is important, obviously.
Yeah.
With medical stuff, you obviously have to keep the right paperwork and keep, have a system for that. But AI can definitely help with that part of it.
And that's productivity right there.
That's right.
If you could remove that administrative stuff that they have to deal with from their day,
and
they can see more patients.
Yeah, and focus on
It's
what
a
they
no-brainer.
actually got into medicine for in the
Exactly.
first place, to focus on people and, and do some more research and all that sort of thing,
Lots of opportunities.
Yeah. We haven't talked about this before, and I just had a look at my notes and I saw this was written down, capital gains tax.
Oh, yeah.
So New Zealand doesn't have capital gains tax, but in contrast, Australia has capital gains tax. It's got stamp duty. It's much harder, not harder, but it's more expensive in Australia to buy a home and sell a home.
Yep.
I am obviously, I kind of agree with not having capital gain tax because I see the benefit of it. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on capital
Yeah.
gains tax. Is New Zealand going to ever go down that future of, capital gains tax and stamp duty? Or, yeah, just like, let's hear from you on that.
We're against it. We have not seen any proof of the benefit. We've seen lots of proof of disbenefits. So my brother-in-law lives in Australia. They've got capital gains tax. He tells me of some of the stories they use to get around it. And there are lots of stories of how they get around it. But it also means that when they build up a business and they're going to sell it, they're going to get capital gains tax. So essentially what you're doing is you are penalising that person for creating a business and employing people. So what do? They don't sell it. So you don't get a better business or a new injection of people that are going to take that business to the next level because there's this big thing in the middle that's in the way. And so what often happens is they will split the business up into different smaller bits, maybe to the children or something else like that. Look, tax has to be simple. It can't be complicated. Capital gains tax is all types of complicated. And the actual benefit you get from it is delayed. So if you implement it today, you're not going to get it until capital is gained in 5 or 10 years' time, maybe. Well, what happens if it goes down? What if your land and buildings, the value of your land and buildings go down? Is the government going to pay you back?
It would be fair to say in our current climate, if we had capital gains tax here, say at the moment, then investors would be not that keen to invest in, building new building
Correct.
projects because they would be thinking about they're not going to make as much gains at the moment.
Yeah.
So they would be worried about the tax that they'd have to pay. Is that right?
Yeah.
So it does encourage, growth. It doesn't encourage more housing.
It
more,
discourages it.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
that's
mean,
right.
No, I mean saying not having the tax encourages people to grow.
Correct.
And
Correct.
Whereas if you
Frees
have
them up
capital
too.
gains tax, it'll just discourage it.
Yeah. The Greens tax is like a communist manifesto for tax. It's they're going to tax everything. If you succeed and buy a house and it's over a certain level, they're going to tax you for that because you're wealthy.
Yes.
And you spent your whole life getting there. If you set up a trust so that you can actually pass on your house and other bits and pieces to your kids, they're going to tax that. If you die, they're going to tax that. So they tax you when you're alive, they tax you when you succeed, and then they tax you when you're dead. How's that going to make us prosperous? Please tell me.
Let's go on to economic growth and
Yep.
population growth, the tie-up between that.
Yep.
So a number of economists have argued that strong migration has increased overall GDP, but has not necessarily improved GDP per person if productivity does not improve. So what do you say about population growth? Is that a good measure to try and lift economic growth?
I think the analysis that economist said is absolutely bang on. I hate to say this, but certain governments, both on the right and the left, have used immigration to make us feel wealthy. How do they do that? They open up the borders and bring more people in, the demand for houses go up. Therefore, your price of your house goes up. You feel wealthy and you spend more money. That does nothing for our export revenue. Nothing. It's the domestic economy. It's money going round in circles. And it leaves us vulnerable in the long term. Because, like it or not, small country at the bottom of the world, we need to export to survive. So it's a neat little trick to do that, but it doesn't actually help us. Now let's look at Norway. Super wealthy. 5 million people. Denmark, super wealthy. 6 million people. Singapore, twice our GDP. Twice. Where once we provided them aid when they were first became the country, I think it was in the 60s, of Singapore. We provided them money for helping them to develop. We went on the whole neoliberal thing. They stuck to building their wealth, and now there's the answer for you right in front of it. 175,000 US per annum is their GDP per capita. Ours is about 85. This is important. This is not communism economics. This is national economics, nationalist economics. This is us building our own wealth for our own benefit for future generations, bit by bit, block by block.
Let's talk about inflation at the moment, because inflation is affects everyone right across the spectrum, businesses, everyday New Zealanders. Recent data showed annual inflation rising to around 4.1%,
Yeah.
largely because of the higher fuel costs linked to the Middle East conflict. What are your predictions going forward, and how do we kind of somehow, by growing the economy or investments, bring that inflation down?
Yeah. You think about it, it's not only inflation in terms of the cost of diesel, say, it's also the cost of your food, because you need diesel trucks to transport the food all around the country. Both of those things, now that we've shut down our refinery, have left us vulnerable to supply chains, which is why the Middle East crisis has given us so much problem. Because all of those ships have to get from that place to our place, and they're big ships, and it's why we had to run like crazy, and why Shane Jones picked up the phone and talked to Singapore, talked to South Korea, talked to Japan, said, please, can you supply us enough fuel to ride us through this? It just really showed our vulnerability that we've got without having our resources. We shut down exploration into oil and gas. People just don't understand where oil and gas goes. You know, the three biggest things that oil and gas produce: steel, concrete, glass. Wind and solar will not produce those. They don't have a hope. You need what they call strong, dense energy, right? Stuff that can fire up a boiler to 1400 degrees Celsius and turn things into glass or steel or concrete. So if you're struggling, if you're insecure in those things, which we've put ourselves in that position, then that's silly. The flip side of that is, if we can make ourselves secure with our own supply, we don't have to rely on it coming from the other side of the world. We can produce it here. Simple. So that's why we're doing it. That's why we're looking at hydrogen. That's why we're looking at geothermal. That's why we're looking at oil and gas. Let's make ourselves secure and secure our supply chain, so we know what the actual cost is, and nobody else can actually interfere with that.
And that in turn, all this investment in all these different fields will obviously slowly lower the cost of inflation.
Correct. We'll have way more control on it. I think one of the single biggest factors at the moment for inflation is diesel, because it costs us too much. We have to buy it from everybody else that produces it.
That's right. And then we look at the alternative, like coming up with policies where we're just going to be spending more.
Yeah.
That's contrary to what you're talking about. You're talking about investing more.
Yeah, and that's what economic nationalism is. We build our own communities, our own businesses, our own resources. We tighten up our own supply chains. We supply ourselves as much as we possibly can. Look, we produced enough food in New Zealand for 40 million people. There's only 5 million of us. If we can't sort that out, there's something wrong.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's wonderful, David. Just so wonderful to hear you speak on so many different topics. So I hope people come around and listen to all this, because there's so much there for them to glean. I'll just close with one last question. You spent your career focused on economic development and now have the opportunity to influence national policy in government.
Yep.
Why do you believe New Zealand First has the policies and the determination to help get New Zealand back on track?
Yeah. So we'll work on both sides of the coin. You've heard me talk about energy. You've heard me talk about the cost of supermarkets and food for our people, and the banks. Those things need to be dealt with, so those costs go down for us, for New Zealanders, for Kiwis. The flip side of the coin is that we will be investing in sectors that we know are internationally competitive and will provide higher returns to New Zealand and New Zealanders. That's a different approach. The leave it to the market approach won't go there. We do. And actually, interestingly, for those that will hear this and go, oh, really? Are we not leaving everything to the market? The rest of the world is figuring this out as well. They're all doing it. They're looking at their supply chains. They're looking at their vulnerability. They're looking how they can grow their businesses to be competitive in a global situation. They're concentrating on themselves. We need to do that too. It's, the old neoliberal economics, I'm sorry, that's last century.
I'm just looking at from my business perspective. You don't
Yep.
leave everything to the market. It would be as crazy as saying, I'll just leave it to the market. You actually focus on, your own manufacturing, your own supply chain, how you're going to,
Yep.
so if you work on it on a micro level, you're just applying it on a macro level.
Yeah, and you're trying to seek those things that you're good at that and maybe better than others in.
That's right.
You've got an advantage there, so you focus on that. That's what we should be doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and really enjoyed what you shared. I'm sure our listeners would enjoy what you've had to share as well, and will
Thank you,
glean a lot
Bernadette.
of information out of it.
Lovely to talk to you again. You
Thank
always have
you.
really hard questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.